Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley, and I am the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. For most of us, grieving is one of the hardest things we do in life. Why is it necessary? What happens when we try to stuff it down or shy away from it? And is there any hope after grief? You will hear great answers to all of these questions and many others in this important episode. David Kessler has been described as the world's foremost expert on grief and loss. He has written several books and co-authored 2 of them with Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was one of the pioneers in grief research and who helped establish the hospice movement worldwide. David has received high praise from sources as diverse as the New York Times and Mother Teresa, and I believe you'll see why when you hear what he has to say. David is the guy I want to learn from when it comes to grief, as he provides hope and practical advice. In addition, he will describe the 5 stages of grief as well as the 6th, finding meaning after loss. So join David and me as we do a deep dive into finding meaning in grief. David Kessler, welcome to Super Psyched.
I'm so glad to be here with you. Thank you.
David, your story is so compelling. You're a grief specialist, a thanatologist, a word I actually didn't know until I recently looked it up. It apparently means one who studies death and grief. And I was wondering if you could share with the listeners how grief became a part of your life's work.
Sure. It's not a job you sort of choose as much, maybe it chooses you. So when I was 13 years old, I had a mother who was dying in a hospital, in an ICU. I was in the lobby, unable to be with her because I was a year too young. He had to be 14 and I was 13. Then at the same time, across the street at a hotel where we were, there was an active shooter, and it turned out to go on for 13 hours in one of the first mass shootings in the US. So at a very young age, I was exposed to not only my mother dying, but so many other people dying, and it changed the trajectory of my life and really brought me into this work.
I'm so moved by that story, and obviously it's such a sad one, and it makes so much sense that that would be how your relationship with grief was born. I was wondering if you could share with the listeners what grief actually is.
Grief is a reflection of a connection, a physical connection that has been lost. And grief is the pain, but grief is also the love we feel. If you're going to love in this life, you're going to have grief.
You've mentioned that grief is the cost we must bear if we are to experience love. And yet, it's so hard. Why do we grieve? And why is it important?
Well, if we attach and love, we're going to have to deal with loss someday. That's just apparently the rules on planet Earth. It's been set up that way since the beginning of time. And, Americans sometimes feel like grief is optional or death is optional, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people the death rate's 100%. Once in a while, someone will say to me, my family's cursed. I mean, we've had so many people die. I'll go, by the way, every single family is going to have 100% of their family members die. I mean, it just is what happens here. We're born, hopefully we flourish, and we die. And obviously that's heartbreaking when someone we love dies. And, we often say they died too soon, and it's always too soon. Even if they're 100 years old, people have said it was too soon. We don't want to say goodbye. We don't let go of this life easily.
There's something so profound about that idea. Even if we're 100 years old, or if it's been around, if the relationship has survived 100 years, it's always too soon. And I think that's a big piece. I remember my own grandfather who was into his 90s talking about that, asking for just more time. There's something unique about being human. I think that amongst the species that live, we're the only ones who can confirm that we are cognizant of this timer.
Animals seem to know, but just like you say, we can't ask them and confirm, but their behavior shows us that they do seem to have an understanding around death.
Can you say more about that? That's fascinating.
Well, I just, even in my own life, when I've had a number of dogs in my life, and when one of them has died, the others come over and they smell and they seem to know that death has happened. The other thing is, I've been with people who were dying in their end of their life, and their dog never left their side. And then suddenly when they died, their dog got up, and it's as if their dog knew there was a part of them that the dog was engaged with that isn't there anymore.
There are too many accounts of this pet-human bond, and I used to run the pet loss program for the Humane Society in Silicon Valley, and the tears that I saw in the face of pet loss were greater than just about any I've seen. And you also mention pet loss at numerous points in your book, which, by the way, is not optional reading, folks. It's got to be read. It has a 5-star average on Amazon for a reason. But I'm wondering if you could speak about the pet-human bond, pet loss, and why that might even be. Yeah.
Well, a couple of things that I think, one, I always say, if the love is real, the grief is real. So if you love your pet, there's going to be grief. The other thing is, grief and love and all that's about familiarity. If you have a brother across the United States that you see every 20 years and you don't really get along with him, and you have a loving pet that you've had since they were a puppy, and you've had them for 20 years, and they're with you every single day, every single night, their absence is going to be very loud, perhaps louder than the brother you never see.
Yeah, I heard that a lot, that I cried harder for the loss of my pet than any other death, and I feel guilty about that.
But I want to say to that, first of all, let's talk about that for a moment. There is a notion of comparing losses, and there is no comparison in grief. I say all tears count. And I think sometimes we're not a secure society in our grief. If someone's grieving over their pet, it actually doesn't take away from my grief. If in this pandemic, someone's grieving about a wedding that they've been dreaming about since they were 5 years old that had to be canceled, I've seen people go, yeah, but you can have another wedding. My loved one died. Wait a minute. Their wedding grief and my loss of a loved one are two different griefs. All tears count. Their grief doesn't take away from mine, and mine, all griefs get to stand alone.
I love that idea. Oftentimes you hear about people saying, I'm giving first world problem complaints. And I'm wondering, what do you say to that when people say, kind of diminish their own grief in the face of thinking, well, somebody else has it worse?
Well, first of all, people always want to know what's the worst grief. And I always go, the worst grief is your grief.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the worst grief is yours.
It's the worst.
And the same way, I can remember when Sandy Hook happened, I would be talking, and I met with some parents at Sandy Hook, and oh my gosh, heartbreaking. And I was also, working with people who would say, my mother died at 90 and I feel so guilty I shouldn't grieve her because those kids died in Sandy Hook. And I'm like, well, they stand alone. Let's think about this. Love is part of grief. If you told me you loved your mother, I would never say to you, Adam, no, I love my mother. No, don't we live in a world where you can love your mom and I can love mine, and my love of my mom doesn't take away from your love of your mom? and you can love your job and you can love your spouse and your partner and your friends. And that love doesn't take away from my spouse, partner, friends, pets. We get this notion in grief that it's okay to compare.
Right.
The problem is if you win, you lose.
It's
So
a hollow
that's
victory.
not good either.
It's a hollow victory.
It's a hollow victory.
My goodness, that is so on point. You worked very closely with the great Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I was wondering if you could describe what it was like to have such a luminary as your mentor, perhaps a story that describes your relationship with her.
She was more honest than I think we're used to in this world. We would call her unfiltered. She had an honesty that you would appreciate or it would piss you off. And you always knew where you stood. She had amazing instincts. I'll tell you a story just about who she was. And for anyone who is not familiar with her, she identified the 5 stages of dying, and we can talk about that as it pertains to grief. She wrote the classic book on death and dying. She's one of the founders of the modern day hospice movement. She testified before Congress to help make hospice what it is today and palliative care. And so I was supposed to be at a conference where she was the keynote in Egypt. And it's when she had her stroke and was not able to attend. And then afterwards, I was able to talk with her on the phone. And we'd never met, we'd never spoken before. And I had said to her, hi, and David, I was supposed to be on this conference and, so sorry about your stroke. And she was like, how was the conference? What was it like? And, we talked and I said, how are you doing with your stroke? We talked about that. Then at the end of the call, I said in my non-attached sort of way, Elizabeth, what an honor to speak with you. I hope someday, somehow, some way we get to meet in person. And she said, how about Tuesday? And literally, I thought, well, there I am hoping and Elizabeth is the kind of person who's like, well, if we want to do it, let's
make it happen. Right.
So that's who she was.
Amazing. And I love the audacity of you asking and connecting. I imagine that you had to kind of power through a lot of internal resistance just to have the gumption
I'll give you one other story. True. I don't know if it was our first or second visit. I'm embarrassed to tell this story. I said to her, and keep in mind, I'm probably in my 30s.
Right.
I'm this young buck, and it's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And I said to her, as she's in her hospital bed in her living room, I said, Elizabeth, is there anything I can help you with? I so want to help. I'm really good with pain management. I'm really good with, I could help with your IVs or if you need your medication sorted. I don't know if you have your advanced directives in place. I'm telling her what I could help with. And she's like the inventor of them.
Exactly.
And she said to me, oh, yes, you really could help. I need my air conditioner filters changed. And I had that moment where I went, no, that's not one of my tools. I'm not known for, changing air conditioner filters. And I really had to have that moment, where you stop in yourself. And I said, I'm here to help. Am I here to help in the way that helps my ego? Or am I here to help, period? That if she was to say, I need the floor scrubbed, I would scrub the floor. And I said, okay, where's the filters? Oh, I don't have to have them. You'd have to go to Home Depot. So, I changed her air conditioner filters. And, so many times we say, I'm here to help. Are you really?
Really, yeah.
And interestingly enough, years later, she said it was a bit of a test.
She owned that.
She owned that.
And you passed.
And I, but there's so many people who had really used Elizabeth Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember one time she gave me advice and she said, and I didn't know what this meant. She goes, just wait till you're really lecturing. She goes, everyone wants to walk you in, but you might have trouble finding a ride home.
Wow.
And, there, you begin to see how people want to help for them, not for you sometimes. And luckily, most of those people are minorities. Most people in the world are generous, helpful people. But Elizabeth had her share of what she called phony balonies.
Oprah has a great quote of, it's easy to find someone who will ride in the limo with you, but harder to find someone who will ride on the bus with you.
Right.
And I think that shows up so perfectly. We want to share our superpowers. And here you are, this guy with these great, carefully cultivated skills that you wanted to show her how you could care for her. And she said, change my air conditioning filters. And that is such a good metaphor for how we can show up individually and as a community for the bereft. We don't necessarily get to show up with our brilliance. Sometimes we just need to, pull the weeds in their garden or something.
I'll give you an example of that. I can remember when someone died, we were all gathered at the person's home, and someone said to one of the family members, if there's anything I can do, anything, just let me know. And the person said, yeah, you could wash my car. And the person went, oh, okay. And they came over to me and they go, wash his car? I'm not a car. What in grief do you need your car washed? And I said, number one, if you're really there to help, then you're really there to help. Number two, you're so busy in your ego thinking you're not a car washer that you don't realize they want their car to look good in the funeral procession. Just show up. Just show up.
Wonderful is all I can say to that.
So let me just finish with Kubler-Ross.
Oh my goodness, yes.
We go through the stages.
Yeah. Oh, I was just about to add that. Well, you as if you read my questions.
So I did peek. So
you did peek.
Sort of look over the screen. So Elizabeth decided, because the stages of dying were getting so misinterpreted for grief, she wanted to adapt them, and I was really honored that she asked me to help. It became our book on grief and grieving. Literally on page 1, we say the stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance.
Yes.
On page 1, we say they're not linear.
Yep.
They're not a map for grief.
Yep.
They can occur simultaneously. Not everyone has to go into anger. Not everyone has to get depressed. That your grief is as unique as you are and as your fingerprint. But unfortunately, so many people have thought there's sort of these 5 easy steps for grieving. And anyone who's been in grief knows there's no 5 easy steps.
Right.
And Elizabeth was a very messy, organic, rule-breaking person. Once in a while on social media, someone will say, oh my goodness, you and Elizabeth are just wanting us to follow your rules and tidy up grief.
Oh,
and I'm like, yeah, Elizabeth is the rule breaker, and I'm certainly not the tidy person. So it's interesting how that plays out.
Totally.
A lot of people who have issues with them really just haven't even read the book.
Right.
They don't prescribe, they describe, and they only describe a general process that happens in a million different ways.
So one of the things you would like to disabuse the listener of is the idea that it's linear. Even The Simpsons had Homer Simpson cycle through the 5 stages really fast, and it appeared to be linear, which was, great for comedy, but not great for psychoeducation. And you've developed the 6th stage, which we're going to unpack, but I'm wondering, what are the 6 stages? You've mentioned DABDA. The way I remember them is I call it DABDA.
Yeah, let's talk
what are they
about
not?
Okay, so they are obviously denied, and the stages work for any change you don't want.
Yep.
They work for a pandemic. They work for a loved one dying, a pet dying, a job loss. And you don't have to follow that model. You don't have to like that model. You don't have to use it. If I had said to Kubler-Ross, is it the one grief model? She would find that question ridiculous. She would find it ridiculous that there's a grief model. She would go, a model for grief, just grieve. But they are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, which is sadness, and acceptance. Now, the other thing that happened over the years is acceptance took on a finality that Elizabeth and I never intended.
Right.
Grief doesn't end. Mm-hmm. When people say, how long will I grieve? How long will my sister grieve? How long will my spouse grieve? I'll go, well, how long is a person going to be dead for? As if they're going to be dead for a long time, you're going to grieve for a long time. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean we will always grieve with pain. It doesn't mean we will always grieve with pain. Hopefully, in time, in your own way, at your own pace, we can grieve with love. So, as you know, and I talk about it in Finding Meaning, a few years ago, my younger son, David, unexpectedly died. And I wanted to write a letter to every person I'd counseled and say I'd forgotten how bad the pain was. And it was brutal. And I obviously, I said I wasn't a grief expert. I was a father who had to bury his child. I still had a grief expert mind. And at a certain point, when I began to think about, I have to accept this death, acceptance just wouldn't be enough. Acceptance wasn't enough. I needed more. And I researched Viktor Frankl's work, who I'd known and loved, who talked about meaning and how in the darkness of concentration camps, they had been able to find the light. I was fascinated by how do you find the light in the darkness? And I began talking to people who found meaning after a child died, after a pet had died, after a spouse had died, after a tragedy, after a parent had died, a sibling had died. And I was so curious about meaning. And so that became this new book, Finding Meaning. I was so honored that the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation allowed me to add a stage to her iconic stages, so that it's the 6 stages of grief. If you want to think of it that way, not necessary, but there is something after acceptance. And I love how the book has resonated with so many people. I've just been amazed that, I've had conversations about the book I never expected to talk to people about, from, Tony Robbins to Sheryl Sandberg, who called me one night, just amazing people in the world who it touched them and that it's meaningful for them.
As a psychologist who is also informed by the works of Frankl and other existentialists, the idea of finding meaning, we're such meaning-based mammals that we need that, and providing that as the North Star for the 6th stage is just, I think, perfect.
Well, and I wanted to help connect it to grief for people. And really what we're talking about is post-traumatic growth.
You got it.
That's what we're talking about. And one of the mistakes that people make when they hear Finding Meaning is they'll have this gut response of, there's no meaning in their horrible death. There's no meaning in a pandemic. There's no meaning in a shooting. There's no meaning in our loved one dying of cancer. And I'll go, no, there's not. Meaning is in us. Meaning is what we do afterwards. And meaning isn't a spiritual bypass to the pain. It's not a way around the pain. You still have to go through the pain. The pain is going to be what will bring you to the meaning.
I'd love for you to speak more about spiritual bypass. A lot of people engage in it not knowing and thinking that they're taking the high road, and yet it doesn't serve them nor the bereft. I'm just wondering if you could speak about what is spiritual bypass in the face of grief.
Well, we have there's a few negative things that have come out of our self-help movement. I was on Facebook one day and I was scrolling through my Facebook, and I saw this post that said, for every day you smile, you get another day of life. And for every day you're angry, you lose a day. And I think, what a bad rap anger and some of our emotions have gotten, anger and sadness. Life isn't just about the peaks and the hills. It's also about the valleys. And somehow we think we can skip the valleys. And the valleys allow us to appreciate the peaks. And you can't go around the anger. You can't go around the pain. You can't go around the sadness. You can't get to the silver lining. Life has pain in it. It's part of this experience on planet Earth. And I, for one, want the whole experience. And I've never seen spiritual bypasses. Someone going, oh, I'm going to get to the silver lining, or I'm going to think about the meaning, and I'm going to push the sadness out, or I'm going to skip the anger. Well, what happens is when we judge those emotions and we push them down, we become a society of people who have half-felt emotions. We literally have half-felt emotions that don't get expressed. People will go, well, what would happen if I let all that anger out? The anger would come out and you'd get to move just to the next emotion, and you'd never have to feel that moment of anger again. Those tears would come out and they wouldn't be suppressed. And guess what? You'd never have to cry those particular tears again. People don't understand how much energy it takes to push feelings down. And grief is exhausting, but avoiding grief is even more work and even more exhausting over the long run.
You talk in your book about water buffalo who see a storm coming and they realize that they have to run through the storm because the only way out is through. It seems that these water
run
buffalo
into it.
Yeah, they
into the storm.
Right into the storm, and it blew my mind. And it's as if these water buffalo are way more advanced than we are.
They know it minimizes the uncomfortable time instead of us thinking we're going to stay 3 days ahead of our grief.
Right. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that idea of a lot of people live under the idea that if they start the tears, that they will never end. To your point about the anger, if I let it all out, I would destroy my whole garage. Well, maybe. But the grieving process is terrifying to even allow it to commence.
Well, let me stop you real quick. The whole thing about if I let my anger out, I would destroy my garage. Yes, because you've let it build up for so long. It's now the size of your garage. You know what? If you let it out when you felt it, it would never be so big that it could mess up your garage.
So you're saying it's a credit card with compounding interest.
Yeah, it goes on and on and on and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I
agree. What we avoid grows and what we approach shrinks is kind of my dictum. But back to that idea of the only way out is through, and to kind of help someone who may be a bit tentative about even starting their grieving process because they think that if they were to even begin to cry, that they would never stop. Can you speak to that phenomenon?
Well, I tell them, I've never seen anyone in all my decades of work who didn't stop crying eventually. This idea that you just cry and cry and cry, I've never seen that in real life. Tears have a beginning and ending. Then there's a new feeling, and then you might move to anger, and then you might move to tears, then you might move to joy. But there's never been a night that didn't give rise to darkness. And that's just as true about us.
Gorgeous. Let's give you a scenario. A person has been traumatized after a death. For example, a loved one committed suicide and left a nasty letter with a clear message intending to harm the recipient. And for years, the survivor is trying to find meaning, but can't. What would you advise?
Okay, so I would have to break that down. So let's break it down.
Sure.
Number one, we know now that death by suicide and addiction are illnesses in our mind. They are not choices. They are not easy way out. They are actual medical science is showing us actual illnesses of our brain. So I would try to make sure the person understands how that's been evolving and changing. Now, then I would help them picture someone dying of cancer, and they're on chemo, and they're in pain, and they're throwing up, and they try to write a note in their pain, in their throwing up, in their nausea. It's not going to be a very good note. Their body is too ill to write a good note. None of us would go, can you believe she wrote, get me out of this pain? Why aren't you We would never fault someone in cancer for writing that note because we understand it's an illness. I would say to that person, your loved one's note was written by an ill mind.
Wow.
It was not true. It was what comes out of an ill mind. Maybe no different from vomit that comes out of an ill body. And that wasn't the truth about your loved one. And I might have them try to find a good memory. And I would say to them, you know, we always say a part of me dies with my loved one, but a part of them lives on in you. Mm-hmm. I said, that good memory, can you nurture it? Can it live on in you? Maybe that good moment was the real healthy moment. And maybe that moment can be part of the seeds of the meaning you find.
Beautiful. And you also shared some very concrete ways that concrete and symbolic ways that people have attended to their grief and finding meaning. For example, starting Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, or the Sandy Hook survivors I believe Nicole is one of the people who has really set up a really good foundation for gun violence. Is that consistent with a thing a person could do?
Yes, but it doesn't have to be a big organization or a run after your loved one. It can be meaningful moments.
Yes.
Adam, you and I are having a meaningful moment now.
Yes.
You know, today can be in honor of my son. This conversation can be in honor of someone in your life who died.
Sure.
This moment can be meaningful. People are going to hear this. If it brings them an ounce of comfort, that's so meaningful to me. So that's what makes this a meaningful moment. And you and I haven't just started an organization. We haven't changed the world, but we've planted seeds for meaningful moments.
Yeah. It's almost an awareness. It's almost as if another meaningful moment could be I'm checking out at Trader Joe's and I decide to have a conversation with somebody in line that is more than just, hey, crazy weather out here, or doesn't COVID suck, but maybe something that is, yeah. Why is it that we in the United States and in the West in general are so abhorrently bad at grieving on average?
We think death is optional. Death has been removed from our world. You know, when I was growing up, you'd be going to the movies or the park or even to school in the morning, and you'd get stuck behind a hearse. The hearse had maybe picked someone up at the hospital who had died and the night before and was bringing them to the funeral home. We don't see hearses in our modern cities anymore. We only see hearses from the chapel to the cemetery. The dead move around our cities now in white unmarked vans. We've sanitized death. We don't have the experience. I can remember as a kid, there would be a funeral procession that would, go down the street, and the electrical lineman would come down off the pole and stand at the side of the road, taking his hat off. The person mowing the grass would stop mowing the grass and stand in respect. We don't have any of those moments anymore. So there's a cost to this.
I'm thinking about in ancient Rome, it was very common for a leader to hear someone whisper as he was riding through town, "Memento mori, remember death, remember death." And it seems that we used to memento mori, but that we don't memento mori, as you're saying, that somehow we've sanitized, we live under this illusion that death isn't going to happen to us or to anyone we love. And yet I have visited places like Nepal where, yeah,
You
it's
see
right
it.
there.
See it.
It's
It's
just right
around.
there. And
Right.
the cremation happens right at the riverbank, and it's just a part of life. It's
Right.
integrated. I imagine this would be, kind of a hard thing for the listener to hear, but I'm wondering what your recommendation would be to help desensitize us as a society to the inevitability of death.
Quit running from it. Quit running from the conversations. When you hear someone's in grief, don't go, "Oh, that's a downer," and cross the room.
Right.
But instead go, "Oh my goodness, tell me about what you're going through."
Let's talk about the do's and don'ts of people speaking to the bereaved. A lot of people, describe to me, oh, the most painful part is my loss isn't even being acknowledged. It's as if the other person either doesn't want to talk about it or is scared that it will hurt me if we talk about it. What are the do's and don'ts when you are verbally comforting someone who's in grief?
Don't try to point out the silver lining. Don't try to tell them your loved one's in a better place. Don't tell them to move on or get over it. Don't tell them to, think of a better time. All those things. Our job is to witness the grief. Our job is to witness the grief. To say, "I can't make this any better. We can't bring your loved one back, but I can just sit with you in this pain."
What are some self-talk exercises that the witnesser might engage in order to be more present? Because this is not an everyday skill. This is kind of a superpower that needs to be cultivated and learned over time. But to the newbie who's trying to do this, what could they think to set them?
When they're about to approach them, this person is not broken. They do not need fixing. They need witnessing. They're not broken. They're in grief. And someday I will be in grief too. And I will want people who don't try to fix me, but can just sit with me. So can I let go of trying to say the right thing and just let them know I'm here with them?
I love that one. Can I let go of saying the right thing? It's almost as if we want to bring to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in those moments our best skills. And what we actually need to do is be open to the idea that we'll be changing the air conditioning filters and going to Home Depot.
Or just saying, "That has to be so brutal. I can imagine just what you said. You're telling me sitting across from that dining room table is so brutal. I haven't lost anyone, or I have lost someone, but your story is just so impacting me. And if you want to talk about that pain, I'm here. If you want to sit in silence, I'm here. I'm just here."
And just the ability to reflect back what is being said.
Right.
From what I'm hearing, I'm also imagining that a don't is, I know exactly how you feel.
Right. No, you don't.
That's right.
Listen, I'm a bereaved parent. Even if I talk to another bereaved parent whose daughter Susan died, I don't know what it's like to have a daughter Susan die. And that other bereaved parent will never know what it's like to have a son David die. So we can't ever know each other's pain. And we get into trouble when we go, "Oh my gosh, yes, it's so horrible. I can't imagine what it's like for you to have your wife die. I lost my keys the other day and it drove me nuts." I mean, these losses aren't the same.
No, don't do that. And I like thinking of it as just different shades of gray, and just really being able to zoom into the other person from what you're saying. Just zoom in, reflect back. Don't try to be the sayer of wisdom. That's not what's needed now. Just the ability just to say, I see you, I hear you. And I was so moved, I mean, beyond moved, when you brought the loss of your son, David, into the story and described how badly you, as a grief expert, needed witnessing just as anyone else would, that you were not exempt.
Yeah, there's a weird thing that happens with writers. There were things I said in the book that were secrets that I never said out loud. And even if people in my own life were like, you never said that. And I'm like, no, I know it's a secret. I just told it to the world in my book. But it's a secret that there's something in writing I'm at least able to be a little more raw. And I wanted people, look, I've spent my life telling people to be open about their loss and sharing their loss. What? It comes to me and I'm not going to be open and share my loss. I felt the need to. And if anyone's listening, I just want them to know Finding Meaning is a general grief book. It does have one chapter about my experience, but it's for all types of losses. And there's all types of people and stories in there. So I don't want anyone to think this is like a memoir about that
Right.
general book. But I did want to share my experience.
Right. And I wouldn't want anybody to think that this is a memoir at all. It has you acting as an exemplar of how to attend to grief. And I think it was very important that you modeled it in such a vulnerable fashion with everything that you revealed about yourself. I think that serves as a form of role modeling. And I think that was just really important that you did that. So I'm glad that you did that. You talk also in your book about how to deal with children who are in the faith, who are in the family of the bereft. And you mentioned some scenarios in which it could possibly be more harmful to keep a child away from a funeral rather than giving them the opportunity to attend. And I was wondering if you could speak about that.
Well, as parents, and I'm a parent, we want to protect our kids. We don't want them to have to deal with the ills of the world. And we forget, if we got to teach them how to cross the street safely, we have to teach them how to cross the street of life safely, and they're going to encounter losses. And so when those moments happen, that's when we teach about it. Our inclination is to avoid it and keep it away from the child. But number one, we're not successful. Kids feel what's going on. They understand and they know. I have so many parents who will say, oh my goodness, their goldfish died and they were only 6. So we told them it swam to the ocean. And I said, so what's your plan on teaching them about loss? Are you going to sacrifice a goldfish when they're 9 or 10 or 12? I mean, how do you know when to teach your kids about grief? When grief happens, when the neighbor dies, when the grandparent dies, when the pet dies. That's the teaching moment. And they're going to need to know how to handle loss. And, if their grandparent dies, that is part of their life. And there was a lot of confusion. There was a media personality years ago that said, oh, funerals can traumatize kids. It turned out not to be true. We know from so much data that more people are traumatized by not going to funeral as children than by actually being traumatized. And what many times parents don't realize is that kids pick up on our emotions. One woman said, oh my goodness, I could never bring my child to a funeral. They would freak out. My child would freak out. And I said, well, how do you do at funerals? She goes, I freak out. Well, you're teaching your kid to freak out. Of course Right. They're going to. If we take our child to the funeral and they see us putting our hand on the casket and sending love to grandma, they're going to feel that love. If we lean down to the child and we say, you may feel a lot of anxiety as you approach the casket, I just want you to be prepared. When anyone starts telling me I'm going to feel very anxious, it makes me very anxious.
Sure.
So if kids can see and feel a loving space, that's what they will feel.
Wonderful. I remember when my cat died and I started crying. I cried in front of my son for the very first time. And I asked him how it was for him to see me cry. And he said, I thought it was great. It was weird, but it was really great. And oddly enough, my 6-year-old had a goldfish named Ari who died. And that was his very first death. And that became the centerpiece in my TED Talk, just how he felt, identified, and processed his emotions. And he cycled through it. And he became, to your idea of post-traumatic growth, he became stronger afterwards. So I think that parents really need to understand that post-traumatic growth is possible. It's all about how we midwife that growth. And I think
we don't want to cause attachment disorders. We don't want our kids to wonder where grandpa disappeared to, or what happened to the dog when it ran away. That there's so many people who they look back on their childhood and realize everyone disappeared. And it's then they find out, no, they actually died.
So David, here we are in the midst of COVID and everybody is experiencing losses at different levels from the mild to the severe. I'm wondering if you could speak specifically about COVID and how grief manifests in the midst of this.
Well, it's important we name it. So many people have said, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just got up sad. I don't know what's wrong with me. I cried out of the blue last night. Got up angry. Well, we need to name that as grief. Every day I get up, I'm going to be alone, or I'm going to be just with these 2 people or these 3 people. And that's our new world. And I mean, I have moments I sit around and I go, oh, I'd like to go to oh no, can't do that. Oh no, there's no movement. Oh, and it's these moments that hit us. I live 2 blocks in Southern California from a really cute shopping area. The area I knew and loved, that I practically moved into this neighborhood for, is closed and going out of business. And there's just, this is grief around it. We need to at least name it.
The idea of the name it to tame it, so to speak. I'm aware that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, based on what you just shared, was far more organic than to have, just 5 really concrete ideas. But the idea of to name it to tame it is so important, because it can be so overwhelming. The naming process can be so helpful. So I'm really grateful to you for that. I'm wondering, my second to last question is, David, you are deeply entrenched in grief, and yet what the viewer can't see is you appear to be a very happy person. And I'm wondering, how do you find happiness and joy in spite of the fact that you're willing to walk the trenches of this part of life?
Well, I would say a few things. I don't take anyone else's grief on. I only witness it. I give everyone the dignity of their own grief. So I can work in this field because I am helping and connecting and reflecting and resonating and witnessing and giving information, but I'm never taking on other people's grief. That's theirs. I want to give them the dignity of their own grief. The second thing is, when I talk about security in your own grief, I'll give you an example. When when my younger son died, I took time off, I canceled everything. Then it was time for me, just like everyone else who's in grief, to get back to work. And I went back to work, and we had to send brochures out. And, for talks back in the physical world, there used to be live physical talks in the world where people would attend.
I remember those.
And, people would email sometimes, and they would go, I can't believe I got this brochure. And David Kessler is smiling. He's a grief expert. He should not be smiling. First of all, I thought, do you want your grief expert to look like they're depressed? Is that what you want? Isn't my job to model that a smile is possible? And number two, and they went on to say in this one email, and I happen to know about his son dying and he should not be smiling. And I had to go, well, let me think about it. First of all, what a strange belief they have that somehow me never smiling again would be some sort of loyalty to my son. And they actually don't know my son. I know my son. My son would never want to take my smile away. My son loved my smile. I smile in honor of my smile. Now, I got to tell you, I don't want anyone to think if they happen to see me in a video and I'm doing well and giving advice, it doesn't mean that I don't cry. I don't have horrible days. I don't miss my son terribly. I do that. And sometimes I'm doing it on my videos and stuff. I mean, I have a online Facebook group, a free Facebook group that I started after COVID. Anyone who wants to find it can go to grieve.com, my site, or it's facebook.com/groups/David Kessler. But one day I was giving a talk in the free group on forgiveness. And something happened, and I got too angry to discuss forgiveness. And I said to everyone, I can't give this talk today. I'm too angry. And I had to talk about my anger. And, that's my job. Grief is an organic process. I'm going to smile in a brochure, and I'm going to try to give information without you feeling like you have to take care of me. But if I end up crying in a video or getting angry, I'm going to be honest to my feelings. I mean, that's what grief is.
So taken by your authenticity, and it seems like your willingness to spend so much time with death also really allows you to recognize the preciousness of life and how we don't have time to not be authentic. And so I get that from you. And
let
I'm
me
just
give you one more example.
No, are you kidding? Please.
Here's one more example from the physical world. In the physical world, when I would give lectures, 100, 200, 300 people in a room, it'd be in like a hotel.
Sure.
In the meeting room. And next to us might be the CPAs in the next meeting room. And in the next meeting room might be Spanish for healthcare providers. And in the next, might be the Rotary Club. After the day was done, the crew would come in to clean up. And once in a while, someone would go, hey, what was your group in here? And I go, why do you ask? And they go, because your group was laughing the most. And I'll go, grief. And they'll go, what kind of grief? And I'll go, that kind of grief when someone dies. And they can't understand how my group was laughing the most. And what people don't understand is grief increases your bandwidth. I do go to darker places. I do go to despair. A son dying takes me to pain I never wanted to go to. It also increases my bandwidth for joy, for happiness. I'm here on this earth for a limited time. I got a limited time to have a life that honors my son, remembers my parents. I don't want to waste that. And like I said, that doesn't mean I'm not going to have a bad day or cry or any of that. But grief is an experience I have, but it's not who I am.
I love that. And I love the idea that you smile in honor of your son.
Right.
And my favorite TV show of all time was 6 Feet Under. And there were moments of incredible hilarity in that show. And every episode was so meaningful. Right. I wonder, did you see that show? And did you?
I did. And look, there's in the midst of life, there is death. I mean, and I think that show sort of showed it. In the midst of life, there is death. That's sort of the reality of this world.
Totally. So my last question, David, if you had magical powers and could confer upon all people, either skills or awareness as it pertains to grief, what would those skills or awarenesses be? And what do you imagine the effects would be on the individual as well as on society at large?
I've never had this question. If I had a magical power, we're such a grief illiterate society. If I had magical powers, I would remove our self-judgment about grief. I would remove all those feelings of I shouldn't be angry. This anger is wrong. I'm crying too much. I'm crying too little. I would remove the self-judgment so people could just organically grieve. You know, I teach, we come from a long line of dead people. Every ancestor you've had has died. Our soul and our psyche knows how to do it. The only thing that gets in the way is our modern society that says, don't cry, be strong, get over it, move on. I would take away the judgment.
Yes. Amen. That was just beautiful. David, thank you so much for sharing your time, your levity, your depth, and just all of who you are just in this brief conversation. Well, thank you so much.
And I have a lot of things to help people at grief.com. If they're getting the book, there's a free class that can go with the book wherever they buy it. There's free online groups. There's paid support. There's writing through trauma. So lots and lots of resources, self-care videos, tons of things for them to find.
Well, thanks again, David.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.